Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gruff Talk, where each week we take a deep dive into all the ways we can feel better, look better, live better, and age better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman. About 53 million Americans, most of them women 45 and over, serve as unpaid caregivers for family members, often aging parents, many who need help. They are the backbone of home care in this country and are true unsung heroes. You might be one of them. In fact, Rosalynn Carter once said, "Here's the reality. You are a caregiver, or have been a caregiver, or will be a caregiver, and maybe one day you will need care yourself." While this topic is rich with things we can talk about, and I certainly hope to take a few deep dives into caregiving in the months ahead, today I want to focus on something very specific, something that should be done early on in the caregiving journey. We're going to focus on creating a checklist for caregivers of documents and people to put on your caregiving team so you're not in a position of pure panic during a crisis. While we're talking about creating a caregiver checklist for people who are caring for others, I strongly urge you all to think about these things for yourself too. No one wants to think about getting older and possibly needing caregiving, but the more organized you are now, the easier it will be for everyone, including you, down the road. So for help in talking through all of these complicated things and to make it all much less complicated, I turn to one of the best and most respected caregiving experts in the country. Amy Goyer, author of Juggling Life, Work, and Caregiving, serves as AARP's National Family and Caregiving Expert. A passionate champion for caregivers, Amy walks the walk of the caregiver. She has been one her entire adult life, caring for her grandparents, parents, sister, and others. Amy has more than 35 years of experience working in the field of aging and is a certified aging in place specialist. She shares her personal caregiving journey as well as practical, actionable tips for caregivers in her many, many columns and videos. And she is a sought-after speaker and moderates, really super important for all of you who are in the caregiving journey right now. She moderates AARP's Facebook Family Caregivers Discussion Group. You can find that at AARP, and there will be notes about all this in the show notes, links to it all. A widely quoted media authority, Amy has been a recurring guest on NBC's Today Show, and in fact, she was just on a few weeks ago. Right after this, we'll get the conversation started. Stay tuned. Hello, Amy, and welcome to Gruff Talk.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
You know, the last time we had an in-depth chat about caregiving was a couple of years ago when I was hosting a Bone Talk, actually for what was then called the National Osteoporosis Foundation, now is the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation. And that was such a great conversation that we had. So when I wanted to talk about anything having to do with caregiving, of course, you are my go-to person. So let's get to it. Amy, there are so many things we all need to know once we become caregivers. So many, it can be overwhelming. And as Rosalynn Carter has often said, you either are a caregiver, will be a caregiver, or have been a caregiver, or at some point may need caregiving yourself, right? And as you know, I had my own experience as caregiver to my mother before she passed away in 2021. Fortunately for me, I had followed much of your advice, read your book, even reached out to you a few times on social media and the like, and felt fairly prepared, at least in terms of organization, to handle some of, the major challenges that came my way. But it really was one of the most difficult periods of my life. And I know this is true for millions of others as well, including our listeners. So with that as the backdrop, let's get some much needed information from you. And I want to make sure that we talk about all of this, not only through the lens of a caregiver, but also what we all should be doing to keep important documents and information organized for ourselves and our spouses or partners as well. And as you've often said, we never want, and in fact, actually just said it recently on the Today Show a few weeks ago. We never want to have to act on all of this while we're in the middle of a crisis. So first, what's the first step towards getting organized?
Well, thank you for bringing up this. Is a really important topic, Barbara, as you know, and thank you for all the care that you provided for your mom. I followed you, and I know that you really took wonderful care of her. It's
Thank
not
you.
always easy, though, as you say. We all have our challenges. So I always say, for whether you're a caregiver or you're an individual trying to get organized for your own future care, start out by looking at your filing system. Do you have a filing system, or is there a lot of paper still? A lot of us migrated to computers, but not everybody has all of their old files reorganized or loaded onto their computer. So check your loved ones' filing systems. That's what I did when I first went to take care of my parents. And my dad had been pretty organized, but his filing system made sense to him, but it didn't make sense to me. So I reorganized the whole thing. And then over time, I used more and more technology. I used more copies of documents. I kept them in Dropbox or in Evernote, things that I could access on my phone or my tablet easily, as well as my computer. The other thing to check is the safe deposit box. A lot of older people have safe deposit boxes. I think that younger generations aren't using them as much.
Right. My grandparents each had one, for sure. Mm-hmm.
And my parents had one. In fact, they added my name to it, and that was an important step so that when they died, I could access it, no problem. And it just had, the original deed to their house and marriage certificate, various things like that. Actually, did not have their marriage certificate. I had to right away to Indiana to get that, but we'll talk about that.
I heard you say that on the Today Show when you were talking with them. Yeah, wow.
And again, check computer files. What do you have? And if you have organized everything on your computer, make sure that someone has access to that computer. If something happens to you, make sure your loved ones have given you any passwords, that type of thing, because a lot of us think, well, we've got it all on our computer, it's all organized, and then something happens to us and nobody can get into the computer. So look for that. Another thing is, just if you're stepped into a caregiving situation and you can't find things, look for things like binders. People have often file stuff in notebooks, old-fashioned notebooks. My parents had done all their will and estate planning with an estate planning attorney who gave them a big, thick binder. It was like 5 inches thick. And it had everything in one place. And they actually gave them a tote bag to put it in. And so I was easily able to find that in my dad's study. In fact, when I first began caregiving, he was still with it enough. He could give me that and show me where it was.
I have to say, you're very lucky, as you've often said, that they were so organized that they actually did seek counsel from an elder care lawyer or an estate attorney.
Well, they had really both. They had an estate planning attorney, and then on staff, they had an elder care attorney who specialized in getting benefits and things. So they helped us get my dad's veterans benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So we were very lucky that they had done that work.
So let's get to things like power of attorney. Now, this is something that's very interesting. I'd like you to explain what it is, who you think should actually be power of attorney. Can more than one person be POA, or how does that work?
Powers of attorney are essentially giving someone the right to make decisions for you when you can't do that. And it's important that you make these ahead of time, because we can't always plan or know when we're not going to be, able to make decisions for ourselves. Some people do a temporary power of attorney. Let's say you're having surgery and you feel like, I'm not going to be able to deal with stuff for a while. I want my daughter to be able to go and pay bills or talk to people for me. Or you're traveling out of the country or something like that. Then there are various other types of powers of attorney, which I go over in my book, Juggling Life, Work, and Caregiving. I go over the various types, and you'll hear terms like durable power of attorney and various things thrown out there. When you talk to an attorney, ask them to explain all of that to you. The powers of attorney for finance and property is the first thing to look at. Now, this is what gives people the opportunity to manage your finances, your legal matters, your property, if you have a home or cars or anything. It gives them the ability to manage those things for you and make decisions for you, even if you are unable to do so. So, for example, my dad had Alzheimer's disease. He got to a point where he couldn't do those things. But so he was still living, but I was able to manage those things for him. The powers of attorney end.
So were you the if I can ask, were you the exclusive power of attorney, or?
It's a really good question. And again, some of these things vary from state to state in terms of what you can do. So this is why, especially for the power of attorney for finances, I really suggest that people do talk with an estate planning or a elder care attorney. But what my parents did was they did, and let me just say first that there's also powers of attorney for healthcare and medical care. And that's for making healthcare decisions for you. They are two separate things. And in Arizona, where my parents lived at the time, they were able to put a sort of three people in order. So they put me and then my sister and then my other sister. And
excuse me, is that the same thing as a healthcare proxy?
It can be, yes.
Okay.
So where it gets so confusing with the language. So yes, a healthcare proxy can act as a power of attorney. Some states tend to use that terminology more than others, a healthcare proxy. A power of attorney is kind of a good overall term that it's recognized. People know what it is in every state. But again, that's why it's really important that you check with an attorney in your state.
With a local attorney in the state in which you're, talking and maybe caregiving. In my case, my mother, she passed away in 2021. She lived in the state of Virginia. I lived in New York officially, and we had both power of attorney. I was one of them and my sister was the other, and also healthcare proxy. So I guess that was specific to the state of Virginia, or what they preferred is what it sounds like. I didn't realize that. Mm-hmm.
So in your situation, do one of you have, a top first level of responsibility, and then
for the healthcare proxy? Yes, yeah. She put my older sister first, and then I was second.
Yeah,
correct.
But, and what often happens?
But the POA, we were equal. We had equal billing, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So we both
correct.
Okay, that's A lot of times people will do that because, so for example, what if you're in a car accident with the person who's your power of attorney designated, and then somebody else needs to make decisions, for you. So that's why it's kind of good to have some backup, have some, kind of an idea of that. And in our family, of course, I still talked everything over with my sisters, but I had final responsibility and final decision-making power, and I had to sign forms and, the things like that. So the powers of attorney are for finances and property are really, like I said, it's helpful to have an attorney. For the advanced directives, which advanced directives is an overall term that is in advance, you're making your directives known, your choices known.
Yes.
And that can include a power of attorney for healthcare or a healthcare proxy. And it can include a living will. And that will say, what kind of life support you would want, towards the end of life. It can
exactly. My mother had a living will.
She had
correct.
A living will. And did she have a do not resuscitate order?
She did.
And that means that, if you should die, you don't want to be resuscitated.
Correct.
And, someone our age, if something happened to me right now, I'd want to be resuscitated.
Yes, exactly right.
But
exactly right.
When you get older, you get to a point where no, don't do any of these extreme measures to me. And I will share with you one story that's a cautionary tale. My mom had a DNR. And at a hospital that she'd been in numerous times, and she had a urinary tract infection that went septic overnight, just so fast. And she was sitting there in her bed next to me, and she coded all of a sudden. And they came in with a crash cart, and I didn't know what was happening. They didn't ask me anything. They didn't do anything. And they whisked her off to ICU, and they intubated her. So that was not what she wanted. And I was so upset but what I couldn't remember is when they admitted her, because, you go in through the emergency room, it's always a mess. did they ask me about that or did I shut? But I think I thought because it was on file at that hospital.
Right, in the file. Mm-hmm.
And so I really advise people, if you do have a living will, a do not resuscitate, you carry those with you. You post it in the room in the hospital or in their room at home, just to ensure that that doesn't happen, because the first responders and the medical professionals are required to do that if there is no directive not to.
Right.
So that's an important part of these advanced directives. Now, you can do advanced directives without a lawyer. AARP has on the website forms for every state, and you can go to them at aarp.org/advanced directives. And you can download forms. And again, they're state specific because different states require different things. You may need a notary to notarize it. You may need a witness, when you sign it, but you don't have to have a lawyer for that.
Right.
I do recommend it for the power of attorney for finances and property and legal matters.
I just want to give a little plug to AARP, of which you direct their family caregiving initiatives and have for a number of years. And but AARP is an excellent resource for all of this. And you're right. I'm glad we will have all of this information in the show notes and also on my website when we post this episode. But thank you for sharing that with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There's all this is covered at aarp.org/caregiving.
Yes, so many forms. I mean, it really can just be so overwhelming. I was just thinking about that moment in time in the hospital when we did do or fill out the form for the DNR. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so overwhelming and scary and upsetting and every emotion that you could think of, as you know. And so I really want to hold everyone's hand as much as we can with this. But I mean, it really does sound like seeking help up front early on is a very, very good idea. In fact, the last time I interviewed you, and this really resonated with me, Amy, you said, this was back during when we did the last episode for Bone Talk, you said, I can do anything, but I can't do everything, right? Resonated with me and the listeners at that time. So you're a proponent of reaching out and getting help when necessary, clearly. So
Yes.
When is seeking help from an estate lawyer or an elder care lawyer or any other professional a good idea? Like at what point, at what stage do you recommend that? Or does it vary?
As you mentioned, I always say, try to do things before you're in a crisis. So it's never too early. I mean, every adult should have powers of attorney set up. And really, every adult should have some type of a will or something, because even if you don't have a lot, that keeps it from going into probate and makes it easier for the people who are left behind to manage your affairs and deal with your possessions and that type of thing. As I said, I really think it's a good idea to have an elder law attorney or an estate planning attorney help you with a will, a living trust. Again, every state is so different. So it's hard to really know what's going to be best for everybody's individual situation. So right. I do recommend reaching out to someone for that. There are things online where you can do a simple will and not have to have an attorney or use, one of the online services. But if you're really doing estate planning or it's complicated and you want to make sure the powers of attorney are set up, it's a good idea. Again, you don't need to do that necessarily for your advanced directives, but it's a good idea to talk to your doctor. In addition to about, a do not resuscitate order, there's something called a POLST. It's physician orders for life-sustaining treatment, or a MOLST, medical orders for life-sustaining treatment. These are generally associated with people who have a certain, they're battling cancer or they have a certain disease. What are the things that you want specifically? So that's something you can discuss. And the doctors will be a voice. They don't have to be the only voice. The individual creating your wishes is the most important person. And, sometimes caregivers don't agree with their loved one's wishes. And that's too bad because, if they are of sound mind and they make those choices, that's their choice. So it's our jobs as caregivers to carry those out.
Right.
So that's why it's good, to get the advice, talk with people. I do recommend that when people are making their do not resuscitate or a living will, that they talk with family members about it so that they know what their plans are and what their wishes are. My parents and I had, talked about it at various times over the years. So none of it was, surprising or new to me.
Right. In my case, my mother was not a very organized person. I had to swoop in when I started to sense that she had a mild dementia before she fell and broke her hip, and then when everything really, really, went into full gear with her health. And so I did swoop in slowly but surely to help her to get organized. And one of the things I did, and it really is because I read your book, I have to be honest, is I did find a local here in Virginia, where I happen to be at the moment, I did find a local elder care lawyer who helped me to get organized with everything. Because, really at the end of the day, how do we know? I don't know. I don't know about these things. Most of us do not. Mm-hmm. And it just made my life and my sister's life and in our family's life a lot easier. And my mother, I know, felt very comforted by the fact that she felt more taken care of. And she was a big part of course, of the conversation going forward. But that was very, very helpful to me. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can see why, it would also give her a little bit of relief knowing that these things are taken care of. So your loved ones can kind of rest easy and know these things are taken care of. A couple other people who I think can be really helpful real quick is a professional organizer. Can be really great and helpful for this. You can go to the National Association of Professional Organizers at napo.org and find someone local who can help you get all this organized. And then the other one is an aging life care expert. And these are people who they may be known as care managers or geriatric care managers. They can be really helpful. Like sometimes you're a long distance caregiver and let's say your parents, things aren't in order, but you live so far away. How do I do all that? You could hire a geriatric care manager or an organizer to go in and do some of the things that you did for your mom.
Thank you for bringing that up. In fact, I did interview someone here because I was a long distance caregiver. I was living in New York, as I mentioned, and still do. Uh-huh. And I did interview actually 2 different people. And at the end of the day, the decision I ended up making was I was going to be a long distance caregiver, but a very frequent visitor here, like enough that it was, and my mother had a living companion to oversee her everyday care, if you will. And at that point, it wasn't complicated because she hadn't yet fallen and broken her hip. So that was a decision I made. But yes, you're right. They can be invaluable if you don't have that luxury, which I did because of the work I do, to be able to go back and forth rather easily. And it wasn't that big a distance. It was about 300 miles, or is, I should say.
Yeah.
So thank you for that too. And again, we're going to have a lot of this in the show notes so that people really know what to do. So let's summarize the master list of essential documents, maybe just almost like a verbal bullet point, if you could.
Okay, so here we go. So first of all, a list of the key people. If your loved ones have a lawyer, an accountant, a case manager, a geriatric care manager, anybody, all the contact information, you got to have that together so it's easy for people to find. You want to do your will, your living trust, and any other estate planning. You want to have your powers of attorney in place for finances. And, we didn't mention this, but there's even digital power of attorney so that you can go in and manage online things for loved ones. So that's another thing to think about. You want to have your advance directives in place, and that would include your power of attorney, your living will, do not resuscitate, etc. Funeral and burial plans.
Yes.
A lot of people have prepaid plans. You want deeds to burial plots or wishes, even just the specific, music I want played at my service can be a great gift for your loved ones who are grieving. And it's really hard to put all that together when you're feeling so sad. It's important to have a medical history written up, and it doesn't have to be super complicated, but, vaccinations, surgeries, chronic health conditions, medication list, all of those things that are available to people. Social Security information, including the Social Security number, And by the way, you may have power of attorney for someone, but Social Security has their own process. They have a representative payee process for people who can't manage their Social Security benefits. So that's a whole different paperwork process.
Correct, as I discovered.
Yes.
Eventually.
And the VA has a different process too. They call a fiduciary agent. And you may also need to have the bank information, investments, retirement accounts, and keep in mind, again, with the powers of attorney, sometimes those, especially financial institutions, want you to have their own powers of attorney forms filled out, or they want something in addition.
That's
and
correct.
I had to go through this with my parents a lot. And thankfully, I think we discovered all those while my parents were still able to, talk on the phone to people and tell them it was okay to talk to me and that sort of thing. But
Yes.
try and think about that ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
You want taxes, the tax information. Especially, my sister passed away and I had to file taxes for her that year as her agent. So insurance policies, health insurance, life insurance, property insurance, car insurance,
the whole thing. Yeah, you just have to run down the gamut.
Yeah, including Medicare and Medicaid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any benefits, Barbara, that some people have LIHEAP to help pay for utilities or, any other kind of public benefits they're receiving. The deeds to properties and titles to cars. One family told me they finally found the deed to the house in their mother's knitting basket. So that was, they were searching everywhere.
Oh my gosh. I could see myself hiding things in my knitting basket someday.
Right. So birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, citizenship papers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're caring for a veteran or if you are a veteran, get your DD-214, which is your military discharge papers. I had no idea what that was, but my dad had it organized. It was all in a file. And that was the keys to the kingdom to getting him veterans benefits that were extremely, extremely helpful. And he hadn't used any veterans benefits for, since he'd gotten out of the Army in the 1950s. So those things are important. And lastly, this is something people don't always think about, but household things like the utilities. What's your account number for your gas or your water, your electric, your internet carrier. I had to deal with all that with my sister's house when she died very suddenly. Yep. And it was really hard to find all that and call them and get the right account numbers and show them that I was the manager of her estate. So, all of these things, that's just a quick list.
A very quick list, a short list. That was one of the things that I made a priority when I started to get more involved with my mother's affairs early on. When I became power of attorney I went into all of the utilities, as you just mentioned, and I put them all online. Everything went online so that my mother wasn't getting any of the mail. I was getting all of the, the invoices online, and it made life so much easier because I could do that from New York so easily, and then nothing fell through the cracks. And that's really important is, even when the elderly person isn't so far along with their health or maybe with their cognitive functioning, giving them this kind of help, because it can get so overwhelming for them.
Oh, definitely.
Really, I think is important. Keep that in mind, everyone. You may want to swoop in a little earlier than planned.
And I think here's the key thing is when you do that, let them know that you're on the same team and you have the same goal. And that goal is for them to be as independent as possible for as long as possible. So you're not swooping in because you want to take over. You're swooping in because you want them to have less stress. You want things to be going smoothly so they can focus on living their life and keeping, stress is not good for our brains. And so, if you kind of couch it that way, it's helpful. And I think people often are afraid to ask for all this information because they don't know how
my mother did not want to ask for any of this help, but she was so happy when I did start to offer this kind of help. And I didn't realize it until it started to happen.
Yeah.
And so I'll forever be grateful for, kind of just being a little bit more aware enough to start this whole process. Sure. So this was incredibly helpful as always, Amy. And since caregiving is such an intense and emotional experience that no one is really ever prepared enough for sure, I hope you will come back to continue the conversation because there's really a lot more that we need to talk about. Until next time, please give the Gruff Talk audience the 3 key takeaways that you would like them to remember from our conversation today.
I would say, first of all, get your advance directives done. And again, remember, you don't have to hire a lawyer for that. You can go to aarp.org/advanced directives and download forms for your state. That's, any of us could be in a car accident tomorrow, and someone would need to be able to know what our wishes were and make decisions for us. So that's the first thing. That includes the power of attorney for healthcare. Then get your your will or your living trust in place, your estate planning. Make sure you've got all that done. And then I guess 3 would be compile all of this and share it with your loved ones. If you're the person who's going to need care someday, make sure they know where it's located, who to contact for more information and that type of thing. And if you're the caregiver, make sure that you make it accessible, accessible on multiple devices. Like I said, I love that I can pull something up on my phone now and look and get the information I need. I don't have to be home. I'm not searching through papers.
And you said that you use Dropbox and Evernote.
Those are my go-to.
Yep, me too.
Then I can use for everything. And I use the Evernote for my work, my personal life, my mom and dad, everything. I have notebooks for all of it, And, okay, so I'm throwing in a 4th. I'm a rule breaker, I guess.
Go for it.
We talked about this, but don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, there is help out there. Go to aarp.org/caregiving. Read my book, Juggling Life, Work, and Caregiving. ARP has a free caregiving guide at arp.org/prepare-to-care. There are so many great resources out there, and there's no shame in asking for help. It's just practical, and it makes you a better caregiver.
Right. And remember, as you always say, Amy, I can do anything,
but I cannot do everything.
Right. There you go. And this is true. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you're doing for caregivers. I really, really do. And we all do. Thank you. Thanks for joining me,
Barbara. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Gruff Talk, please do 2 things. First, share it with all your friends and family, and subscribe to Gruff Talk wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.